all know, and the Chief Methodologist at Scaled Agile. Myself, I'm an SPCT4, so I've known Dean for many years, and after seeing how SAFe had started to evolve and come to the market, we as a company immediately started adopting the framework, and I was in the initial SPC class, the initial SPCT class, and have really just been a supporter of the framework throughout. I've seen great results. I've historically been a coach in the consulting field, and now I'm helping clients adopt SAFe in that capacity. So Dean, you want to say a couple words?
Sure. Hi, everyone, and thanks for attending our webinar today. And thanks to Blue Agility, our partners, for supporting us here. As you may or may not know, Scaled Agile Inc.'s business model is pretty simple. We want to create the world's best possible IP for building large software and systems. And we monetize that through courseware sales because it's a significant change to implement new Lean Agile ways of working. So we consider ourselves a partner enablement company. Blue Agility and other partners are the way we grew up. So they are our channel, they're our sales force, they're the people that do the heavy lifting in the field. And without our partners, SAFe is just a website. So we really appreciate our partners that sponsor us here and the work they do in the field. Ken, you mentioned that you joined early on. I remember it well, that first class. We're all trying to figure out, what is SAFe? What are we going to make of this thing? How are we going to create a business model around it? How are we going to help our enterprises succeed, and what role do partners play? So you've been involved since the instantiation. Also, you well know that I call you a number of times when I say, what do you think about A, B, or C? So thanks to Blue Agility for having us here. My job is to introduce you to the framework today. And actually, my job is to introduce this slide for Ken to talk about Blue Agility.
Exactly. So just really quickly to give folks the context on Blue Agility, we are a company focused on large-scale Agile transformation, as well as ALM and DevOps tools deployment that supports that. So we're all about transforming your organization, both from a people, process, and tools perspective. We capture our approach to doing this in what we call the Blue model in a knowledge base and enablement tool called Blue Jazz. So that's basically codifying an approach and some best practices and really a toolkit that you can use to drive the transformation forward and start to capture it and make it long-term to be there to support you, after the coaching is gone. And as you can see, we're partnered with a lot of the tool vendors in that capacity, obviously, as well as a gold partner with Scaled Agile. So this is just a little bit about Blue Agility to give some context. So as we head into the content here, just given the number of folks on the call as in Agile, we always like to achieve flow. So we'd like to achieve some flow on this webinar by going through the content, and then we'll leave plenty of time at the end for some Q&A and you to chime in with some questions. So with that, why don't we just head into it, Dean?
Thanks for the intro, Ken. So I'm going to speak fairly briefly, maybe 30 minutes max. Ken's got a few comments, and then we're going to come back around for Q&A. I'll tell you that we will try to be done for Q&A because, frankly, it's a lot more fun for us. Otherwise, we're staring at our screens and trying to figure out what our users' reactions are. I'll briefly introduce SAFe 4. I'll talk about the new foundations layer, and then at Ken's suggestion, excuse me, I'm going to jump right to the large value stream, SAFe for large value streams, because that's not the only change, but it is a material change to the system. Talk a little bit about how you get results, the training that Blue Agility and others can provide to help you succeed down that path, and then we'll have time for Q&A. So let's dive in. This is a very brief webinar, so we're not going to go in much depth here, but if you want to know more about SAFe, you can go to the What's New in SAFe 4.0 page, where SAFe is described there. Also, we have a What's New webinar that's deeper than this because it goes into a little more content. And of course, the website's freely revealed and publicly available, no secrets there. Our commitment is everything we know, we publish, and sometimes we publish stuff that isn't quite ready for prime time, and the user community lets us know that that needs to be improved, and that's the way we do our development. And then the commercial entities. The Scaled Agile Framework is a free property. You're not going to find any ads there. There's no login. There's no paywall. If you use the site, nobody's going to send you an email. It's basically a site where we just want to have the right kind of knowledge. That's our commitment. But Scaled Agile Inc. is the commercial company, and we own that framework, and their commercial site is at scaledagile.com. Ken, you might want to describe some of the resources that you can provide.
Absolutely. So if you go to our website, we have a content hub with some case studies and white papers and different artifacts out there for you to consume. We do have an open enrollment schedule for regularly held SPC courses, so you can go out there and check out the schedule for those. I'm sure there's one coming to a town near you. And then just in general about our various offerings, to learn more about Blue Jazz, even to get access to a trial version of Blue Jazz, you can just go to blue-agility.com and check us out.
And Ken mentioned the SPC certification process. That's a deep engagement, a 4-day training program that includes experiences, prerequisites, and a fairly tough exam. The SPCs are the change agents. We know from leading change in Cotter's work that, and we know from our instincts that it takes a sufficiently powerful coalition for change. So it takes knowledgeable people on site, both from your partners and typically in your own enterprise to make that change. And that's the SAFE Program Consultant Certification. We'll mention that briefly at the end. That's how we got started, Ken. We put a program together and said, let's certify some folks. You came to that, and that's how we built a business around the talents of our SPCs.
Exactly. Thanks for the clarity, Dean.
Okay, so let's introduce SAFE 4.0. Let's talk a little bit about some things that are new here. Number one, we're on a journey. We're on a journey with you, and Ken's going to talk a little bit about this this branch. Never branch your code. We branched, okay, from 3 to 4, but we went public in about 2011 with the first version of the big picture, and that was based upon 4 or 5 years of blogging before that, 2007, 2008, basically when blogging platforms started to really be easy enough to use that I could use them. I started blogging about my experiences of implementing Agile practices at the enterprise scale, and frankly, the incredible personal and business benefits that come from doing that well. It was exciting enough that we commercialized that in 2011 under the brand of Skilled Agile Inc. Version 2 came out a year later, version 3 a year later. The LSE branch, I'm going to leave that to Ken, and now 4.0. What does 4.0 imply? It implies 5.0. What does it mean? It means that we're learning how to build the biggest systems the world has ever seen, higher quality, higher efficacy, in a more productive and efficient manner. And we're not going to stop learning how to do that. So it'd be fun to say, hey, 4.0 is done. That's as good as it is. That'll cover you for all time. But that'll be like the U.S. federal government deciding to close the patent office at the turn of the last century because everything had been invented. It's not all invented. 4.0 isn't perfect. It's the best we know. It's our current direction. This will help a lot, and future versions will help even more. The bodies of knowledge that we have to work with are really robust and rotund, if you will. Agile development, lots of books on Agile, the Agile Manifesto, the explosion of methods that eventually kind of contain themselves primarily to Scrum, XP, and Kanban. Lean product development, books by Reinertsen, Kennedy, Ward, the thought leaders that said we want to build big systems, even cyber-physical systems. We want to be lean there too, even though you can't just refactor everything just for fun because it's software related. And then systems thinking, which is more and more where we start to understand the full context of what we're doing. We understand that the enterprise itself is a system, and when you optimize a component, maybe a team or a program, it doesn't optimize the enterprise. And the system that we build is a system. And if you optimize a component of that, it may improve that component, but it may or may not optimize the overall throughput. So those are the bodies of knowledge. Ken, I think you've been with us since 1.0. How do you see this journey?
Yeah, that's one of the things I really wanted to highlight is how SAFE is not being developed in a lab or in a vacuum. Throughout the entire process, from the very beginning, the framework has been driven forward by actual empirical experience from the field. And I always tell people, folks ask, other consulting firms or colleagues will ask, what's it like, to be within the SAFE community and what have you, and to work with Scaled Agile. And it's just the ability to be able to give feedback and have that change the framework as we went. The great example of that is that the LSE branch, as Dean talked about. So initially in the 3.0 timeframe, LSE kind of went off as another branch to really address a market in the lean systems engineering space. And certainly there's many aspects that you have to think about when you bring in hardware and firmware and other types of development besides software. But the amazing thing that happened, so I was lucky enough to be able to participate in the beta version of the course to start to roll out the LSE framework. And myself and other folks from the field, some from enterprise, other coaches, et cetera, as we sat there and really understood what LSE was, I looked at our client base and said, wow, a lot of these concepts in here really could have been used, not necessarily in the lean systems engineering space, but just for really large programs that had multiple release trains that needed to interact with each other. You know, we would have killed to have this at 2 or 3 clients that we had. So we came to the realization in that 2 days that this really was for large systems that also had a hardware component, and having a parallel branch where some of the same concepts were called different things and there was some confusion there, that we really needed to quickly merge again and kind of jump out of it. So really, in that 2-day window, Scaled Agile heard that feedback and very quickly adjusted and says, you're right, this feedback is valuable, we need to merge back into 4.0. So it just really goes to show you that the feedback from folks actually using the framework is listened to, it's heard, and it is used to drive the framework forward.
Yeah, I remember that session, which was we were presenting the release basically of LSE and updates to 3.0 to 4.0. And we heard loud and clear, kind of, please don't do that. We don't need 2 frameworks. They're not that different. And we went back to first principles for about a second and said, the principles are the same. So we're standing on stage with this plan of record and plan of attack. Alex and I are there, and Chris was there, and we hear the feedback. And by 4 o'clock on the next day, we said, okay, we're not going to do that. We spent a long weekend licking our wounds and saying, how would we achieve that? And can redesign 4.0 to do that. So we do listen and learn. We don't build the type of systems you do, neither does Blue Agility. So we have to learn from you and transcribe that. So we think of ourselves as a board for good content. We like to suck in the good content and use it. We don't care so much about it source. Like Bruce Lee said, take what you find from wherever you can find it. Well, that's kind of our view on things as well. In that process now, with Ken's background, I think you could see why we renamed it, because we didn't leave our lean systems engineering people behind. People are using this to build big cyber physical systems, robotics, big medical devices, and geophysical data collection satellites, to name a few. The geophysical data collection satellite has a satellite, which is itself a humongous system of systems, has a ground station, and a web farm that feeds the data. Well, that is a system of systems for sure. And people use, say, 4.0 to do that. At the same time, you're building big software systems, or maybe even smaller software systems. You're going to need some or all of these constructs as well. So we feel that we're in a good position to advertise the fact that this is a good framework for building big complex systems. IT, physical systems, hardware, software, firmware embedded, mechanics, electronics, molds and packages. It doesn't really matter. We think that the principles apply. So that's why we renamed it. Instead of Scaled Agile Framework, it's SAFe 4.0 for lean software and systems engineering. I'm first going to describe 3-level SAFe, and I'll bet Ken can understand why it is we reflected this that way. Ken, did you follow that story as well?
Absolutely. That happened in that same class, where as we were looking at that, saying, look, not everybody's going to need that 4th value stream level. So, for those that don't have those huge programs or have multiple release trains needed to coordinate, 3-level SAFe is probably fine for them. So we should probably leave that view alone and then just add optionally the 4th view. So that same class that came out of.
Yeah, I've forgotten you were in that same class, but remember the guy in the middle of the class, I won't name the company, who took a copy of the big picture of the 4.0 and he folded it up and said it should work like this. And he showed us an accordion. And Alex and I looked at each other across stage and we said, that's it. That's what we need to do. So this is what you're seeing here is 3-level SAFe and highly compatible, actually directly upwards compatible with SAFe 3.0. No worries there. You see very familiar constructs. You see some new things. You see Kanban for teams. You see a fully elaborated Kanban system for the program backlog, so that features just don't arrive here and they're just in the backlog, out they go. No, they can be considered, that you can go through some analysis and feature readiness, develop a feature acceptance criteria. You see a re-reflection of some of the critical roles, really an aggregation that says many roles are optional. Most people have a system team. I don't recall lately that I've seen a group without one. Not everybody has release management. A lot of programs can release themselves. We think that's a good thing. Shared services may or may not be required. User experience depends on what I'm building. Might be a function or not, but there's no question that we're going to have a way to run the process. Release train engineer, that's our oddly labeled proxy for a Agile program manager. and many of them are. In fact, most of them I know are great Agile program managers. Content authority, maybe that's a chief engineer for you. Maybe it's a business owner, business analyst that has that responsibility. And finally, are we building it right? So this is, are we building the right thing right? And do we have the right and effective process to do that? So that elaboration just kind of tightens up our thinking in that space. You also see some other things as well. You see solution and customer, but I'll talk about those in just a second. One other thing that's quite explicit is the value stream has moved from an interesting concept that controlled budgets to the primary thinking vehicle now. I was at a large enterprise, $25 billion company just a couple weeks ago. And they said, we want to do SAFe. We want to be a lean agile enterprise. And where do we start? And the question was, where are we going to put arts and teams? And the answer is, I have no idea. What are the value streams? What are we supporting? And we came up with some things. It was a medical company. So basically supporting laboratory clinical data was a really big deal. And there were lots and lots of people involved. So an entire art could be allocated to just that single value stream. And then, you know, finance and reporting and clinical trial management, all kinds of things. Those are the value streams. So we want to organize around value. We use this lean construct as a value stream. We did not invent it. This is kind of lean thinking 101 from Poppendiek's work to Kennedy's work. You can't improve a thing you don't understand. So this is the thing we understand, the value streams. We work from there. So really elevated to a first-class citizen as well. And more and more, the focus of what we do is understand the value streams, design the arts to support the value streams, improve the arts and improve the value streams, and then you get the end-to-end largely in hand. Ken probably also remembers that when we launched 3.0, we made kind of a goof up. We took down the 2.0 website basically without notice, or 2.5, we put up 3.0 and we were so happy. And then my email lit up like you wouldn't believe. What are you doing, you idiots? I built all my wiki is built on 3.0. We have all that language. We built that language into our HR hiring guidelines, and you made my framework go away. What in the world are you people doing? Are you crazy? So that took a really awkward couple of days, and we had to back off of that, and we reposted 2.5, and we said, okay, from now on, you're going to get a warning, number one. And number two, we'll make them as compatible as we can. So SAFe 4.0 over here is backwards compatible with 3.0. So all the things that are here, code quality, for example, that's actually been expanded to built-in quality. Your agile teams, the system team, which has been moved to here. I can't see this particular has been moved to there. They're all there. The backlog is there. The program epics, everything is there. Cadence and synchronization is there. It's the same thing, except there are new features as well. So if you don't need multiple arts, or if you have multiple arts and they don't need much cross coordination, it could be handled with an email or just a face-to-face discussion. You're good to go with 3.0. We do, however, want you to move to 4.0 to take advantage of the new features. For starters, things have been redrafted. Every single article was rewritten and peer-reviewed again. So just the basic content for a simple thing like sprint goals or how we do sprint planning, that all has been reviewed and adjusted and updated. So this was quite an effort with 4 of us working full-time for almost a year, just cleaning it up and improving things. So we want you to operate with 3-level SAFe because then you'll have the benefits of the new features, Kanban at the team level, a little better elaboration of XP, Kanban at the program level, et cetera. But you don't have to go there. But when you do, it should be really comfortable. Also, we're committed to not making last year's mistake this year. We're going to support the SAFe 3 website. That is at version 3.scaledagileFramework.com. And all the courseware that Ken and others teach will also be supported there. If you're in the middle of a big 3 implementation and it's solving problems, and we know for sure that 3 solves problems, there's no reason to disrupt that transformation at that time. You can continue with 3.0. But we want you to migrate with us. We want you to move as quickly as you can. We want you to get the benefits of the learnings. So each year and a half, we learn a bunch more. We incorporate that in the framework. So please come when you can. Here's an interesting new area. What do you do with things that are important to SAFe, but not explicitly part of the delivery model, right? Communities of practice are a good example. You know, guilds and Spotify. What happens if we pivot all of our teams to value streams, and now my team here, what used to be together in a functional area are now separated by value stream? Well, gosh, it wasn't inconvenient that they could talk frequently. It was inconvenient that it wasn't a long live resource and it wasn't organized on value, but it wasn't all bad. So we need to adjust for the changes we've made and revitalize communities of practice to make sure that our skills in test automation or Hudson or robot or Cucumber for text-based automated testing, those skills can grow amongst those communities, or Scrum Masters, product owners get together. And other things that we've always had, core values, the Lean Agile mindset, safe principles, and implementing, they've been part of the framework, but not part of the big picture. And that's scary. It means that you might adopt the big picture and not adopt the Lean Agile mindset, or have a different set of core values, or not understand the principles. So that's not okay. So this is a surface area. This is a surface where we can talk about interesting new things. We can talk about leadership. We haven't backed off on that. SAFE is a leadership-led initiative. Any material change in an organization can't be strictly bottom up. It will meet the fixed resistance of middle management who's not on board with the change. Let's change that from the beginning. Let's have middle management lead the change. They own the systems. As Deming pointed out, decades ago, workers are already doing their best. Only management can change the systems, and the problem is the system. So we need those leaders to lead the change, for sure. And that's the specific call out for those in leadership training, which is please lead, and other key aspects of how we'd like you to do that, but they're critical to the process. And Dean, communities of practice are new.
I want to add one point to that, Dean, real quick.
You bet.
Leadership. So, leading the change, I found it very useful to really get leaders to take, an active involvement. In the course, we talk about the concept of Gemba, the leaders kind of getting out from behind their desk and out where the work's happening. And so I found it very valuable to actually, if your leader is willing to engage, give them very specific actions to get engaged and get out where the work's happening, so that people can see visibly them, leading that change and being involved in the process. So just a little tip there to help get leaders actively engaged there.
Yeah, let me give you a hint. This is something that I'm sure you've seen or would like to see. Recently, I taught an on-site SPC class for the 40 leaders of a division of one of the world's largest tech companies. Managers, leaders, people who were not going to operate as SPCs. And I asked the VP there, who stayed for the full 4 days, he said, "Why are you doing this?" He said, "No way do I want my team to know less about this new model than others that we've trained in the model. So if our job is to understand that, I want to know everything there is to know about that so we can truly lead." And that was a real epiphany for me, which is, it's not off the shelf. They take leading safe. No, we want to take the SBC class. We want to be good at this. And communities of practice, I've introduced those before, but Ken, I think you were comment a little bit on your experience in building these.
Exactly. I mean, as you mentioned before, they really help, bridge the gap from, in the past where maybe you were organized functionally more directly and you kind of were all in the same department and you worked each other on a day-to-day basis. So in addition to helping make sure we continue to develop skills of developers and testers, et cetera, I've also found communities as a great way to just get and keep momentum going with the transformation itself. So just the viral nature of the communities and the information that's shared and the successes that get shared, it really gives people a concrete place to engage and start to learn about what's happening, even if they aren't necessarily yet even on an Agile release train or in an Agile team. It's just a way to start to get interactions from a lot of people. And then for those folks that are, it's great knowledge sharing and it's great to be able to keep the momentum in the organization.
Yeah, I think it's a key principle of Lean to institutionalize knowledge acquisition, right? This is one way of not just finding the knowledge in Team A, but sharing the knowledge or having community practice develop new knowledge that gets shared across all the teams. No substitute for knowledge still.
Yeah, and then depending on how formal your communities are and how large they get, it might actually represent some leadership opportunities from people too to help lead aspects of the community. So a lot of great things can come out of those communities.
Yeah, you can imagine a future Lean Agile leader manager who has fostered some communities of practice and helped the company achieve a whole new level of performance.
Exactly.
Our values haven't changed. We did do a quick edit, right? It's not simply code quality on the upper right over there. It's built-in quality, and the reason is you're building big systems. You don't have any choice. Quality is not a nice to have. Wouldn't it be great if our quality was higher? Quality is a must-have, and the reason is that the accumulation of small errors and omissions You know, an overrun here, a misassumption here, a protocol that wasn't well followed here, a security flaw. Those add up and they explode. So you get exponential growth in poor quality systems if the built-in quality isn't there. And that's why we opine significantly on the team methods that we use to develop the systems, and also on the quality practice that we described to that. We can't leave that. And as always, if we can execute a program well and get better results, everybody likes it better. So the ability to do effective program execution, that's part of what our partners and coaches bring people to. Alignment, simply global alignment trumps local optimization every time. So we just want to make sure we're building the same thing. Here we're building a solution. Do we agree on what it is? Imagine if we don't. And transparency breeds trust. You know, trust is a personal relationship. I can't put trust into a set of practices. Trust happens when people behave in such a way that they can see what they're doing and they learn to understand that I'll have all the data. You're going to be late. I see that. No, I don't hate you, but I see that you're going to be late. So what can we do about that? Or that did not work. How are we going to recover? That's what transparency gives you, is the ability to, what's the opposite of transparency? You can't manage a secret. So the core values remain the same. The Lean Agile mindset has been with us. It's been expanded a little bit to kind of rebalance things. The House of Lean, respect for people, flow, innovation, relentless improvement, and the manifesto. We look at the manifesto every class. We fire it up. We look at the principles. We do an exercise. Let's look at this thing. I have every team pick one principle of the manifesto, and I say, does this dog still hunt? Does this scale? Or was this fine in 2001? And I'm not a zealot about these things, but I got to admit, for a group of people 15 years ago to put down just 3 pages to kind of define what we mean by a better way of developing software, you got to be proud of that. So I was uninvolved, but I was certainly happy to harvest the learnings there. And then the House of Lean and the Agile Manifesto together, now we have the tools, we have the philosophy. Right, Ken?
Absolutely. I wanted to highlight just one aspect of the house, the innovation. So at the end of each program increment, which is the program level time box that we live in, there's what we call the IP sprint, the innovation and planning sprint. And that's really a sprint that, first it does provide a guard band for us to deliver on a cadence. So if we do have some work that's spilled over from the prior sprints, we do have some buffer to finish that. But really, I wanted to focus on the innovation part. The planning is really to get ready for the next PI and to go through your PI planning. But innovation, a lot of times folks have a hard time sort of wrapping their head and making space and giving teams the time to innovate. So one of our coaches recently came up with a unique way to describe this, to maybe as one tool to speak to leadership who oftentimes might kind of raise their eyebrows at this 2-week sprint at the end where we don't fully plan work. Let's say, so this analogy kind of made sense. What if you were a team member and you were trying to teach your leader how to run a marathon? And so you brought them out to a track at the local high school and you say, okay, go ahead, start sprinting. And then once they started sprinting, you'd say, don't stop for 26.2 miles. And, it's just kind of a funny way to reinforce that if you're continuing to just, sprint after sprint after sprint and not giving a chance for the team to innovate and really come up with better ways of doing things, it's not going to be a sustainable pace. So that's just a little anecdote that folks can use to maybe try to justify that, making that space for teams to innovate.
Yeah, and Ken, I'm sure you saw that spike that we put out on Essential Safe, where we stripped out everything that you didn't absolutely have to have and said you're doing safe if you're doing this. And the innovation planning sprint did not go away. It didn't get shortened. If you're doing Essential Safe, you have to have time to innovate. Otherwise, you're basically hostage to the tyranny of the urgent. Every sprint matters. On big systems, every sprint for every team matters. So when you clean off your desk, when do you refactor that code, when you download that new open source, when do you try some new test automation? The principles evolved, and I won't belabor them here due to time, but I couldn't be happier that we have a solid grounding. As a matter of fact, it was the evolution of these principles and the clarity for lean systems builders that caused us to be able to comfortably collapse the 2 frameworks into one. Because we developed these looking at lean systems engineering, and we said it's important there to take an economic view. Yeah, decisions need to be based on economics. Apply systems thinking. Duh, yeah, this is a system of systems of systems, and it lives as part of a portfolio. Assume variability and preserve options. Why? Probably gonna have some fixed deadlines here. going to have customers going to have expectations. I know we want to be agile, but I'm going to launch a satellite. It has to go up that day, or it's going to be a giant financial disaster. So I'm going to need to keep some options over. So set-based design and option theory, it needs to be built into the process. Build incrementally with fast integrated learning cycles. Pretty obvious, that's what Agile is. We have milestones in SAFe now, they're new. Well, we don't want to go crazy and say, great, SAFe has milestones. They look a lot like, design complete, requirement sign off, test plan complete. No, they don't. They look like objective evidence of working systems. The system is evaluated this milestone and that one. So we're good with milestone so long as they measure our real progress and not the indirect proxies that we have. Visualize and limit WIP, reduce batch sizes, and manage queue lengths. This is a power-packed, product development flow, Reinertsen, Ward, Donter Oosterwall story of we want to make the work visible. We need smaller batch sizes because it goes through the system much quicker. And managing queue lengths. Why? Because queues are slow. I'm at the end of a queue. I got a long wait. Well, I can either figure out how to serve the queue a lot faster, get some more baristas at Starbucks, or I can shorten the queue. I can eliminate that as a commitment or take that work out of the system. Apply cadence and synchronize with cross-domain planning. The last two, unlock the intrinsic motivation of decentralized decision-making. I've given you 2 minutes on what, if you head down the SAFe path, will be a full half day of learning and understanding why these are the right principles and how to apply them. And more, just in the last few weeks, I've been on the road pretty continuously talking to clients. Most of the time when I'm diagnosing their problems and they say, we'd like to make a change, I go back to the principles. And sometimes we make that change. Somebody wanted to convert to 1 week sprint links, no problem, right? Faster integrated learning cycles. Somebody wanted to harmonize a couple sprint links and pick the longer one. That would be slower. Somebody didn't think it was necessary to synchronize their sprints, even though they're building one system. This is a rule base that allows us to create SAFe, to keep SAFe safe.
Exactly. What I like to describe this as, when I teach these principles in that half day you mentioned, Dean, is, I often start out by saying that, with my kids, I always send them out, to school with a specific checklist of everything that could happen to them that day and how they should react if it happens. And of course, after everybody chuckles about that, I say, well, what do we do instead? We teach them principles and values and help them to have the thinking and learning tools that when they come up with, variability like we see in developing software, they're going to know how to act and they're going to know how to handle it. And so whenever I hear somebody say, well, we're not doing that because that's not what SAFe says, or that's not what Scrum says, to me, that's not the right answer. Is what principle am I violating, right? If I change that practice, what principle am I violating? So always come back to the principles as the why behind the what. And as long as you convince yourself you're living to the spirit of the why, that change to the practice is probably going to be okay.
That's a really good analogy. Can I use that?
Absolutely.
I like that one. I'll remember to say Ken Stone taught me this for about a year, and then I'll probably forget. Let's talk to the meat of SAFe now in about our 15 minutes remaining here. Talk about SAFe for large value streams, because what happened when Ken was in the room and the big systems builder said we need the portfolio and the big software builder said we need the value stream. We had to create this new level. And here everything is new. There's not a single thing here. There are certainly reflections of things that aren't as new. These are new roles, exactly the same troika as we had before. Some things appear here, epics, but economic framework, fixed and variable solution intent, model-based systems engineering, set-based design, agile architecture. These are the things that allow you to stay soft, to keep your options open. Kanban, enablers, etc. So economic framework, much work has gone into the thinking about how would, I want to decentralize decision making. How would this person and maybe the product manager and the product owner know what to do? Establish a decision-making framework that includes the aspects of economics. So other new things, we've always implied the customer, but we never got to talk about him because we didn't have a surface for it. Well, we talk about him now. We don't talk about it generically. Hey, you have a customer, big deal. We talk about the fact that delivering value continuously requires the customer's direct involvement. There's no throw it across the transom. Here's your requirements, go away. The customer, helps provide the solution context. This runs in their environment. So what did we learn in their environment? What requirements did that impose on the solution that we hadn't really considered for Who knows? You know, heat, power, lights, whatever. Solution and solution context, the solution itself, the subject of the system. Never been happy about the fact that we had teams in art sprinting, but the solution wasn't sprinting. Well, now specifically, the solution is sprinting, and that's true both at the value stream level as well as at the lower level in the process. A lot of new stuff here, Ken. Did it give you? Did you have to catch your breath a bit, or were you overwhelmed, or was it all just logical?
No, I mean, I think a lot of the concepts, once you understand the program level and how it scales from the team level, you know, you understand a lot of the basic concepts of the value stream level, you know, the same troika, the capabilities fitting into the PI time box. So I think the opportunity then is to look at some of the new concepts that have been introduced, you know, the pre and post PI planning sessions and the solution intent, and say, you know, how might I be able to leverage these new concepts at the value stream level? And to highlight, it's not an all or nothing proposition. You don't have to say, oh, I need absolutely everything at the value stream level, so I've got to adopt the whole level. You know, you look and see where you're having problems executing and where you're seeing challenges exist, and maybe you incrementally adopt pieces of the value stream level as you have a need for it. So don't make it, you know, as we do in Lean Agile, we take, you know, incremental steps forward. This is a framework. We always go back to that. And it doesn't have to be you adopt the entire framework or even an entire level. If pre and post PI planning sessions make sense because you have, you know, 2 release trains and you want to get them aligned before you head into the PI planning session, adopt that alone. And you're really just in a very lightweight way picking up some of the new concepts and taking advantage of them.
Yeah, and a good example is just this set-based development, right? This is kind of the option theory. So how many programs that aren't full value streams face critical milestones? Most all, right? So what does set-based thinking does? It makes us think differently about how we approach those milestones. So in set-based design, we're going to have some parameterization. We launched version 4 on a schedule that was known to people like our partners well in advance. That means we locked a fixed, dedicated milestone, which had very nearly fixed scope in the calendar 6 months in advance. If we hadn't done that, our partners wouldn't have liked us. Well, how did we approach that? Well, we had 3 design sets. One was that if worse came to worse, some of the new articles, like maybe set-based, might only have an abstract, and we would go live with that, and we'd say, hey, we didn't get quite as much done here as we thought, but hang in, and we would write that before people caught up to us. Another was we reskinned the whole thing. We have a whole new style sheet, a whole new design, a whole new menu structure. Well, we actually did a branch, which is not always recommended, right? That said, no, we're going to continue all the new content development over here. We're going to do the skin over there. And if the skin works, we'll merge the skin back. So we had 2 ways to make sure that we had scope capacity so that we could absolutely meet the design. But that's not only a value stream construct. And that's why Ken points out that these important notions, they're here. They have to be somewhere. We can't put everything on every level, and we just have to help our implementers understand that these are constructs, and you can use them where you need to use them. The supplier is a construct. Maybe you don't have a supplier. Maybe it's going to be a big deal, as we'll see in a second.
Or maybe you have suppliers only at the program level, and that's where you can use that construct. It doesn't have to be an entire release train.
So I have a supplier at the program level, and I can do pre and post planning with a supplier. Makes sense, right? Yep. So we just want to do what makes sense, and our job here is to put enough down that's descriptive enough that you can largely follow it, but to recognize that there is no perfect descriptive pattern, there's no real prescriptive pattern, and that when you understand why we do these things, why there's an I and A at the solution demo, and it turns out that maybe you can't get everybody together, you go, well, is there a solution demo, and can we have people stay after to figure out what's wrong, right? That's the spirit in which we created the framework. I mentioned briefly solution and solution context, and I'm personally thrilled that we can talk about that now, and talk about solution intent that goes along with it. Now we can talk about the object, the object of our desire, the thing we're creating, and how it fits in its environment. And this can get pretty interesting. One group is doing the electronics for a Boeing 787. That's a system of systems of systems of systems of systems of systems, if there ever was one. That means that there's parent requirements, there's subsystems, and subsystems have subsystems, and there's a whole kind of requirements change that go through that. So we see that fairly often. We want to be able to reason about them. reason about that. Sometimes our system of systems is just, hey, I need to interface my ERP system. So I've got to build an adapter for that, or have a way to get data in and out of that system that is other than as anticipated. We needed a new word. And Ken, why don't you defend this word? Tell us why it came.
Well, yeah, so at the end of the day, when you have multiple release trains working on features, individual features that need to come together, we needed to find a word to represent that entity that was consumable and really would make sense to somebody in the field. So, we kind of looked at each other in the room and said, we're really building capabilities. It almost sort of fell out of people's mouths. What's the capability we're trying to build here? And so we said, boom, there you have it. It's a capability, and you need, it's large enough that you need multiple release trains to be able to work together to create and produce that capability. You're still doing it in that single PI time box, so you're constraining, the amount of work and the duration that's going to go. So you're still keeping that program increment time box. You're just leveraging the teams on multiple release trains in order to realize that.
Yep, it's a higher level of abstraction. And indeed, some of the big systems builders said, well, that's the way we have to communicate anyway. This system is so big that it has 1,100 features, right? 20,000 requirements. Well, it only has 30 new capabilities, and that's what we're gonna discuss. Solution intent. Ken described how this is a framework, and I want to describe a usage model that I just saw that I thought was pretty extraordinary. Working with a medical device company, basically in the radiation therapy business. They're not huge. It's a single art at that point. Well, do they need solution intent? Well, the question is, do they need to know exactly what their system does at any point in time? They sure as heck do. And they even need to be able to provide traceability from new stories that came into the system, how those are tied to unit tests, how they do the functional tests, and how those relate back to the features, in this case, the labeling claims of the system. So they can bring a story along and maybe throw it away, but they're going to end up creating a specification that reflects the result of those stories. They didn't want to put stories into their quality management system because they change so fast. The whole point is they're soft as heck. So when they're done, they capture the result of that story in the specification. They left all of their Agile world outside the scope of their quality management system. And they said, however, when we learn new things and we figure out new things, we're going to port those capabilities back into the system intent, and all the tests that are associated with that, those we're going to capture, we're going to associate back to our solution intent. So there's a case where a medical equipment company with a single art leveraged heavily this notion of solution intent as a single source of truth. And why traceability? Because sometimes it's simply mandated. Many people are asked to do verification and validation. You can't do that without traceability. For those of you who don't have to do it, that's fine. But for those of you who do, we need a way to handle that problem. And now you can see the various aspects of how we're evolving the system and how the system works currently. So a great surface, especially for those building large-scale systems and high assurance systems for others, where you can't just say, it's a pretty cool system. There's about 2,000 stories and we threw them away, and please read the test cases to figure out what it does. That doesn't fly in many cases. Some places you're going to give me a document that says exactly what the system does, and so we want to support that. Does it mean I write it first because there's a spec? No, it means that it's an evolution. It means that before I go to clinical trials or before I ship to the customer, I have to have a complete set of specifications, but I didn't have to have them a year ago. So let's not confuse the fact that many of us require high fidelity understanding of what the system does with waterfall development. That's not the same thing. And we just need to exploit the fact that there's material differences there to be able to handle that problem. So it's not a trivial construct, but guess what? You're not building trivial systems. We mentioned the customer very briefly as well. This isn't any old customer. This is a customer. I'll pick the system on the right. This is a customer. We're working a fair amount now within defense systems. We have a number of programs that work right now, and those customers are being treated differently and asked to behave differently than their prior customers. It is not, we've done the specs, the big fat, here's our big fat SRS, I'll pretend like this is development side, you go do the work. You're going to be directly involved. You're going to think about new terms like what absolutely has to be exactly that way, and where do we have variability, right? Where can we provide a range of options? We need you to validate these assumptions. attend planning and solution demos, collaborative scope and schedule management, managed investment funding model. There's an article on safe and guidance, it's not linked to the big picture yet, called Agile Contracts. Read that if this is your world and start to understand the difference between a traditional customer and an Agile buyer. Sometimes we're that proxy for that customer because we're building a system that lots and lots of people use. And that even then, that affects our behavior because that means that our people who are responsible for content authority, the business owners, the product managers, et cetera, they're involved in the game as well. So if we're developing in this fashion, they're all involved in helping define and build that system. We don't have a model where we get specs and go away. We can develop specs, but they have to be developed interactively. Suppliers are critical, right? As Ken mentioned, you might have a supplier simply at the art level. Their role is different too. Sometimes they're opaque to us. They're bigger than us and they're not doing Agile development yet. So we're gonna have to deal with them on some type of milestone basis. So we're gonna have to start aligning these milestones with our development milestones and figure out what we're gonna do in here. We might come along and say, that's too far. Sorry guys, we're gonna need an unofficial drop of the code or something here as well. Well, that's not the way we think really, but look, okay, then we're gonna need an adapter. You're gonna have to build an API that we can test, that you're confident that when your code runs against that API, it will deliver the right data set to the agent here. Okay, so we have to bust into that. We also have to help our suppliers improve their processes and become more lean and agile. It is a tenet of lean that suppliers are partners. They're part of the solution. And everyone from Deming to Ward just bemoans the fact that we get into this, this customer supplier relationship that says, I want to buy the cheapest supplier for my system, and then afterwards that supplier is going to go away. Well, the knowledge goes away with it, so we can't afford that. Pre and post planning, we mentioned the fact that there's a fair amount of planning that happens at this level, multiple arts plan. Well, what do they plan for? Value stream level, we want to spend a little time thinking about what they're going to plan for, and afterwards we're going to see how did the plans turn out. Maybe we need to make some adjustments to that process. Ken, have you seen this at work?
I have. Like I said, even before SAFe 4.0 came out, folks just saw the need to do this when they had multiple value streams and really started, practicing several of the things that made it into the framework formally. So that pre and post meeting just made logical sense. So people started to do it. And yep. I think the alignment that you get from that, and the other thing to recognize, just like when you go into PI planning, you can't walk into PI planning cold with the team seeing the features for the first time. Same thing if you're up at the value stream level. So there has to be a continual process of backlog refinement for capabilities so that when you get to the pre-planning sessions that you already have some features underneath those capabilities that you're going to plan across the arts. So it really provides a catalyst to drive the preparation at both levels and give you a way to really get aligned before you walk into the room.
It's another example of not pretending to be so smart you can figure everything out for others. We simply witnessed this, right? We witnessed this. We said, what's the pre-planning? How long does it take? Who attends? What are the roles? What are the responsibilities? And what are the goals? What are the outcomes? And then what do you do with post-planning? What do you do if one of the plans is off? So we didn't sit at my desk and say, I think there should be pre and post-planning. We simply observed it forming around multiple arts and then recorded it appropriately. That's the way we learn. That's the way we record. That's why I say 4.0 isn't done. And finally, the way managing the flow of work through the system is now, I wouldn't call it prescriptive, I would say it's structured. So if program gets tons and tons of local input, use a program Kanban system. A value stream gets tons and tons of local input, uses a system. But guess what? Sometimes I get marching orders to say, we need to update all the back office servers to 64 bits and recompile every line of code. We need to migrate to JBoss. We need to do single sign-on. So what we do is we have a mix. So each Kanban system has its local input and its global input. And that's modeled throughout the system. So if you want to know what work is happening, a key element of trust, the Kanban systems exploit that work. And if you do that, the way we've done it, work with the Blue Agilities of the world to train everyone that matters, create the SPCs, Ken started out as an SPCT, now he manufactures them. Those SPCs go on site and train leaders and executives and managers about Lean and Agile principles and practices that's safe. They then also train the teams and launch trains. Train after train, one train at a time, pretty soon you'll be getting these type of results. These aren't made up results. I wouldn't be so bold to claim a 20 to 50% productivity, but if somebody says they measured it and that's what it is and they're willing to publish it and put their name behind it, then I'm gonna put that up too. Same goes for quality, same goes for time to market. Frankly, unbelievable results. So I wouldn't believe them if I were you. I would, however, go to the case studies and read them for yourself. Ken, did you want to comment on?
I think we're running close on time. Why don't we just head into the Q&A session?
Okay. Okay, so I had one last slide. Actually, that was the last slide, so no problem. Great, so we've got a good solid 9 minutes left for questions, and I sure hope we have some.
Great presentation, guys. We have a few questions from our esteemed audience. One of them is it necessary to train all the leaders?
So that's an answer that's going to need a little context. So if there's a 400-person company and there's 2 or 3 C-level people and a lot of kind of director-level people and peak process people, et cetera, the answer is you're going to want to train almost all those people. You may not get those C people in, but certainly at the director level, those are the people that own the systems. A company is 60,000 people, okay? So there are levels of executives that aren't necessarily directly involved in this process, and they're further removed from the coding process. So no, we wouldn't say that, you know, that all those people need leading safe. But the people around the trains, absolutely. The key decision makers around content, the business owners are going to participate for sure. So we train, what we mean by train everyone, we say train everyone it takes to make a train successful. And then over time, you will have trained almost everyone.
All right, another question is, how many trains do you need before using the value stream?
I'll take that one. So if you go back to some of what we talked about before, you know, that value stream level is really for, you know, very large programs that require multiple trains to coordinate. So at what point are you ready to do that? And I say somewhat facetiously is when you need it. So if you've got 2 trains and, you know, they need to coordinate with each other, is it possible that the RTEs of each train and the product managers of each train could just talk to each other and coordinate things? Or do they really need, you know, a value stream engineer up above them or a solution manager up above them? So what I always advise organizations to do is to start coordinating without adding the complete extra level. There may be individual pieces that you adopt, like I mentioned earlier, that you'd start using, but by the time you get to implementing the entire, you know, value stream level, you've probably incrementally adopted different pieces of it, and ultimately, okay, now we're up to 5 or 6 trains. You know, we really do need a separate value stream engineer to coordinate all those activities because it's just too much for the RTEs on each train to manage. So I always advise just to inspect and adapt, and as you're seeing challenges with executing, adopt the pieces that you need. But there's really no hard and fast number that says you're going to have, you know, once you have 3, you have to add the value stream level.
No, and so much depends upon the nature of the dependencies between those. If those products are largely independent and you can communicate fairly simply the dependencies, that's one thing. If those arts together are required to create a single solution, then you're almost certainly going to need the value stream level.
All right, we have another question. How do we transition middle managers from no longer needed roles to ones adding value in an agile organization? How do we advise those senior leaders on transitioning out those that cannot adapt?
Well, that's a really interesting question. We start with the process of engaging our managers and teaching them a new way of working and starting to have them rethink a little bit their role and responsibility. It's not the day-to-day technical leadership of an individual, a team. It is the day-to-day or potentially day-to-day coaching of a team or multiple teams. It is very much managing up and managing the impediments around it. And it's still, they have responsibility for that career growth. Now, in the end, will that management layer be as deep or as wide as before you went to a leaner path? Not necessarily. So a lot of those folks are going to find interesting and different roles. And I think it's also fair to say that we know from a change management perspective that not everybody likes any change. I mean, if you gave away free ice cream, somebody would complain that we're killing people with cholesterol, right? So people don't like change, and certainly not everybody likes every change. Well, if the people can't change, then sometimes they have to change themselves out of the system. But those are the exception cases. The rule is that the talented people that want to help build a lean agile enterprise always find roles. Those that are defending the old way of working, that's a more dangerous place to be. So I have yet to see, I'm thinking back, I have yet to see a single case where a talented person who had some instincts for lean agile leadership, who was a traditional manager of even a single team, did not find success and an empowered and more significant role in the new company. I have seen cases where people just didn't want to adopt the new model, and guess what? They don't have to. It's not a law. It's just the new way of working for that business, and there are other options for their careers.
Right, I've seen a lot of those folks transition into RTE roles or product managers or other roles explicitly defined in SAFe. So I think there's many opportunities, like you said, Dean, to take the talented people and find a different way for them to think and work within the context of the framework.
Indeed.
We have another question. Does the process tool offered by Blue Agility, and I'm going to assume that's Blue Jazz, provide SAFe guidance?
I'll take that one, Dean, obviously. So absolutely. What Blue Jazz really does is it takes the SAFe framework and really adds additional context, additional information that you can't glean directly from the ScaledAgileFramework.com website. So we've worked in conjunction with Scaled Agile for what we've done in Blue Jazz to really augment and work well with not only eSafe, but with the content that's out there on the public site as well. So you'll see a lot of video content. I mean, people just learn differently. So they'll be able to watch videos to have context explained. They'll be able to see simulations of what happens in a PI planning session. And then for technology adoption, they'll be able to say, okay, I'm in the SAFe framework. I'm using one of the Agile project management tools. How do I define a user story? How do I review my program backlog? And Blue Jazz can literally walk you step by step through those different technologies to be able to perform those activities. So it's very tightly aligned with SAFe, and it's continuing to evolve and grow as we learn more about deploying SAFe, and the framework itself continues to grow.
Yeah, I've witnessed the tool. It provides a lot of additional context, a lot of practical advice, and just helps you understand the words on the page. It's an interpretive tool.
We have another question related to Blue Jazz. How does Blue Jazz relate to other ALMs like Rally and version 1 in supporting SAFe application?
So Blue Jazz is not an ALM tool. It's not a tool like Rally and version 1 is. It basically, provides knowledge and guidance, and the tool guide that I talked about really helps you understand how to better use those tools. But it is not an Agile project management tool or an ALM tool itself. It just basically helps you adopt those that are out in the market, either the ones that we've pre-configured it to adopt, or any of those ALM tools that have a web-based application. Blue Jazz can help you provide these guides that I talked about to be able to learn how to use them. But it is not an alternative or a replacement for those tools.
I believe we're close to time. That was the last of our question.
All right. Well, I'd like to personally thank everyone for attending the webinar today, for taking the time out. Hopefully you were able to enjoy a beverage during your happy hour, whatever beverage that might be. And I would like to thank Dean for his time as well and spending this hour with us. It's been very valuable, and I very much appreciate it, Dean.
Yeah, thanks to you, Ken, and Blue Agility for doing all the work in the field that really matters.
All right, our pleasure. Thanks, everyone. And Miriam, we'll have a recording of this available, correct?
It will be sent out within 24 hours.
Great. All right, thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.